You can go ahead and start with a. You can go ahead and make the poll live. I'll just tell folks what we're asking there in the poll. The question is, what is the biggest challenge you face dealing with health misinformation? And there are 5 options, and if you could just pick the one that's the biggest challenge for you, one of the options is other. So we one A is don't have good resources, or you don't know where to start. Two, B is you're not sure how to determine what is misinformation yourself. C, not enough time. D, a challenging political environment that you teach in, or E, other. So would love it if you took some time to answer that. We'll take a look at the responses here in a little bit, but I'll go ahead and get started once people start filling that in. But Greg, do you want to kick things off?
Absolutely. So today we are joined by Vanessa Otero. I'm sorry, not Vanessa Otero. I'm
Yeah,
not ready
that's
to be injured. Okay.
fine.
um, who focuses on misinformation in media. Um, she comes with many years of history. She's very credible at this. She has her own organization and company that focus on the different information that's going out there and kind of just understanding the perspective of that media that you're getting, where it's coming from, how that impacts the information that we're getting. And so she's going to talk to us today about some of the misinformation in kind of the health media. Um, Vanessa,
All right.
if you would.
All right. Thanks so much, Greg. It's really a pleasure to be with you here today. And I'm the founder of Ad Fontes Media. You may know us for producing the media bias chart, which I'm going to just flash here on the screen really quickly. But in order to not distract you with all the different news source logos on there, I'm going to go back to my initial screen. And what we're going to talk about today is uh, practical strategies for teaching about health misinformation. So you might know us from producing the media bias chart, and the way that we do it is by analyzing news content for reliability and bias. And because of that work, we also provide media literacy resources for educators. And what I'm going to talk about today is something that we run across every single day in our work: health misinformation. And I know how much of a challenge it is to deal with it and how truly frustrating it can be. So my goal today is really to give you practical strategies for teaching students how to sort through conflicting information and make those sound decisions. So again, real quick flash of the media bias chart. We can revisit that a little bit later. But today, what I wanted to cover specifically is first lay some groundwork in understanding why people are susceptible to health misinformation in particular. Then we'll dive into some specific strategies. First one is going to be spotting red flags or rhetorical devices. The second is the practice of evaluating veracity by looking things up, really crucial skill. And then we'll dive into a number of real examples, and a strategy itself is diving into real examples. And then we'll just finish up with some other resources that we have on hand. So I want to start first with discussing why is it difficult to tell what health information is true. Okay, so I'm going
Vanessa,
to, yes,
if you're showing something on your screen, we only see you at the moment.
you only see me. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
let's show my
Or
screen. Can you see that?
yes. Thank you.
Okay, is it on?
Why
All
is it
right.
difficult to tell what health information is
Yeah,
true?
okay. So you guys missed the agenda. Did I not show this one, the agenda?
No, I did not see that.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I'll make sure uh, this is the agenda. I just talked through it, but just so you have a visual. And if you missed me showing you the media bias chart, sorry about that too. There's a quick picture of it. Okay, so why is it difficult to tell what health information is true? Now, you can still see my whole screen, right? I think so. Okay, let's see. Sorry. I'm just
Yes,
gonna
we can see your whole screen. Mhm.
okay, I just want to show you this one window. Can you still see that?
So why is it difficult to tell what health information is true? We
Yeah.
see that. Yep.
All right. Thank you everyone for your patience with the screen sharing technical difficulties. Okay. So, uh, it- so I'm using misinformation as a blanket term to cover concepts of fake news, disinformation, misleading information, inaccurate information, and those are not all necessarily the same. But just to facilitate the speed of this discussion, I'm going to refer to it broadly as misinformation. And the tricky thing is that it's not a matter of being smart or dumb. Now, this past week, Aaron Rodgers was in the news for spreading misinformation about COVID vaccines. Now, Aaron Rodgers is not dumb. He's not a dumb guy. He's smart. He's a genius level, especially when it comes to football, right? He's got a particular set of skills that's really world class. And many of you may know other people who are smart in certain areas. They may be brilliant in their careers and in other professions, but they're still susceptible to misinformation. And a couple of things I'll identify or that he spoke about with like COVID vaccines being ineffective and possibly causing like fertility issues. Those are widely regarded as misinformation statements, right? So it's not a matter of being smart versus dumb. It's you can, if you're not trained in the particular kind of sorting through information that you need to be during this information age, you can be susceptible to spreading misinformation for a number of reasons. Okay, so it's not just a matter of people being dumb. Health information is complex. It's not binary. It's not. It's just not one or the other. And there are underlying issues of science and statistics, which themselves are not binary. They're also complex and require numeracy skills and scientific literacy skills. So the fact that like health information in particular is so complex, it makes it tough for a lot of folks for a lot of reasons. So discerning what's true requires knowing or learning how to think about the problem. And I often make this analogy like I happen to be good at like reading comprehension and analogies and like logic tests. Like I was a lawyer, like that's just a strength for me. But there are things that I'm not very good at. Like math doesn't come as easily to me. Directions I like really struggle with for some reason. I'm also like terrible at following recipes and cooking. So like there are just things that I'm just really not proficient in. And in order to do all right, I just have to practice them. And so for some folks, like reading comprehension, like rhetorical analysis, grammar, like those things don't necessarily come easier to them. But if you either know or can learn how to think about these issues, then you can overcome that. So because health information in particular is complex, people turn to shortcuts. What kind of shortcuts do they turn to? Well, one really easy one is like political identity. You know, trying to divide the world into like us versus them, or like my team versus their team, is really common right now in this complex information environment that we live in. So if you say, my party, my political leader believes one thing, I'm just going to go with that. If they say, COVID is not a big deal, or if they say it is a big deal and I should be afraid, like people will rely on those shortcuts. And that's a really common thing for humans to do. There's a great book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and that outlines how we humans make decisions, especially when things are complex, and we make snap decisions and snap judgments about complex things all the time with limited information, because our minds like to create stories when we have when we have just small pieces of information. So having more information actually helps you construct truer stories. But again, there's so much out there that it's easier for us to take shortcuts, like just following what a person that you trust says, or following your confirmation bias. So we can all get better at this we can all get better at thinking about what's true by practicing these strategies. So I don't want folks to despair that not everybody is necessarily good at this. I talk really fast. I'm gonna take a sip of water. You can see me click through my screens. Yes, it's still working.
Yes, still working.
All right. So next one says understanding appeal. So some of the examples I'll show you today are really outlandish. So we'll talk about the emotional rewards of believing outlandish misinformation. Um, you know, some folks use the term conspiracy theories. I try to avoid the term conspiracy theories because no one thinks of themselves as a conspiracy theorist. It's pejorative and derogatory. People like to think of themselves as critical thinkers. Even Aaron Rodgers said, I'm not an anti-vaxxer flat earther. I walk to the beat of my own drum and I'm a critical thinker, right? And to him, the information that he came across it felt sound to him, like didn't seem too outlandish. We're going to go over some truly outlandish claims here today, but there's reasons why people will believe even that. They're listed here, like feeling of knowing something others don't, feeling of being right, feeling of being individualistic and going against the grain, and this feeling of certainty and order in a simple, good and evil binary. Again, another reason we like to default to binaries is because it's just simple. It takes less time. So let's talk about some strategies for identifying and teaching against health information. So learning what I mean by spotting red flags. Red flags are rhetorical devices, rhetorical patterns. Often misinformation is constructed in a certain way in order to trigger logical fallacies or in order to hijack logical thinking. So what do these rhetorical patterns in misinformation look like? Here are some of the most common ones. I do a whole webinar just on conspiracy theories. You may have seen something like that before, but these are the most common ones. So one red flag is mostly questions and not answers in the text itself. So it's organized as a list of questions or hypotheses, like why wasn't this, or it doesn't add up that, or it's really unlikely that X happened because, and that's a hypothesis. So what we want to teach students is that journalism, like reliable information, is answers. It's not questions. It's okay if like a headline has a question here and there, or there's some questions interspersed. But if you're looking for a source of information, you're not just looking for a big list of questions. You're looking for answers and evidence and proof, and those are different kinds of sentences. So another red flag is that not only does it have questions, but it asks you to answer. Oh, I spelled that wrong. I'm sorry. Ask you to answer the questions. Ask you to answer the question. So it'll say things like, well, if you can't answer these questions, or do you really know what happened? And the logical fallacy there is that if you don't know, then the presented hypothesis must be true. And it's not. So we'll at the end go through some examples of where people just present hypotheses or questions and make you assume an answer that's insidious. Next one is a prospective defense of the truth of the article itself. So sometimes they'll make outlandish claims, but they'll prospectively defend it as worth considering, even if it seems absurd. So they'll appeal to your identity as a critical thinker, or somebody who's not dumb, somebody who's trying to find good information, and it'll say things like think for yourself, or do your own research, or you should be asking these questions. And these sentences just seem harmless on their own. Like, of course you should think for yourself. Of course you should do your own research. Of course you should be asking questions. Like, I'm going to talk about, questioning things that you have a reason to believe are not true. But when the article is appealing to a person by stating these things, it's just like a anticipatory defense, which it's a rhetorical device that should raise a red flag. Okay, another red flag: vague, insidious plots. So vague meaning like really non-specific, insidious, like something bad is happening, and a plot, big old plan by multiple people. What do these look like? So these types of outlandish misinformation can suggest insidious plots by someone, like usually a big someone, like the media or elites or corporations or the government, but it doesn't exactly say what the plot is that's the vague part, or provide any evidence for it. Okay, so again, so throwing out things like no one knows how deep this goes, or there's no telling who all is behind this, that's not evidence. That's more supposition. Those are more questions. Those are more hypotheses. But this format of the vague insidious plot is really a common rhetorical device in these types of misinformation. Okay. Another big one that's really popular, especially in health misinformation, is the outlier credentialed expert. All right, so this is where it gets really tricky. So credentialed experts, often these are health professionals, doctors, nurses, scientists, like epidemiologists, right? People with actual real credentials. And that's confusing for folks. Why? Well, what a red flag in health misinformation is that it elevates the credibility of one credentialed expert who goes against the consensus of their entire credentialed expert peer group. Okay, what does that mean? So one doctor versus pretty much all the other doctors, or one scientist versus pretty much all the other scientists. Now, this is a tricky one, right? Because medicine and science are naturally fields where there's not always 100% consensus, right? It's the scientific process. It's the whole field is designed to have hypotheses, do studies, test them, try out new things. And, not everyone agrees on everything all the time. But this is really common when it comes to like climate change misinformation as well, and health misinformation. So folks who, want to, want to believe something that goes against, the consensus, like the current consensus of the medical community, you can always find a handful of like outlier doctors or nurses or scientists who disagree, right? Now, they might not, and sometimes like people will point to instances where the outliers were correct, right? And that does happen. However, this is a process where like the medical community, the scientific community are continually exploring. And usually when you have like really large consensus, like 95, 96, 97% consensus, like that vaccines are effective, that masks are effective, that COVID is deadly, that climate change is caused by humans. Usually, that's more likely to be correct than not, right? So this one, when they're elevating the just one expert that no one else is that is widely debunked, that's a big red flag. Okay, another one is crying censorship. So claims that being taken down for promoting misinformation is censorship, which therefore somehow proves that the thing being taken down is actually true. Okay, so that's another logical fallacy, right? So these articles might say like they, like the big them, big tech, these big platforms, they are taking us down because they are trying to censor us. The incentives for social media platforms are typically not in the direction of taking content down. They like to leave content up as much as possible. So it doesn't make a ton of sense. But what they're arguing here, the logical fallacy that they're arguing is that going in the opposite direction of everyone else it doesn't make it true. They're saying that by going against the grain, that makes what they're saying true. Going against the grain has nothing to do with whether it's true or not, right? Going in the same direction as most everyone else doesn't make something true or untrue. Going in the opposite direction of everybody else doesn't make something true or untrue, okay? All right, we'll look at an example here. So here's an example. The title here from this website, a small website called the Blue State Conservative, says, "Are an alarming number of athletes dropping dead after getting the COVID jab?" Yee, that sounds, that's a question. What are they trying to, what is the answer that they're trying to elicit from this headline? The answer is yes, like an alarming number of athletes are dropping dead after getting the COVID jab. But again, red flag that the headline here is a question. Not only that, but most of the rest of the article is questions, okay? So questions and hypotheses. So one of our red flags, if you remember, was lists of questions or hypotheses. So this one says, inbound from a reader, so their source is a reader. They have a list of links, okay? of cases of athletes who just dropped dead. All of them are recent, and the number of them seems excessive. Now, that's a hypothesis. It doesn't actually say if it is excessive. And they go on to say, the point of this is to crowdsource as many of these claims as if possible. Why do we see a rise in these sorts of mortality? Is it a rise, right? So they're not answering any of these questions. They're saying, seems suspicious. That's not news. That's the opposite of news, okay? How many are there in the US, and can we run those down? There's, again, 2 more questions. So a bulk of the beginning of this article is questions. It's not a good sign in the first place, okay? Then we've got another red flag, okay? So we're asking this very question. So we did this research, blah, 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 and it says, according to the possibly blackmailed and bribed media and politics, these are unfortunate coincidences, okay? So here we have another red flag of vague, insidious plots. They're just saying, like, all of the media, all of politics is bribed and blackmailed by who? What's the proof for this? Where is the information that would support any of these really wild hypotheses and claims? There's not. There's just the vague, insidious plot in the middle of this article. And then at the end, the call to action says, as a conservative site, we've experienced big tech shadow bans, censorship, temporary suspensions, and outright account bans. Even some conservative sites choose not to support us. This is capitalism at its finest, after all. Get views or someone else will. It's not it's a red flag. It should be that others won't associate with them. Again, red flag, cries of censorship. Uh, in order to prove that this is true, doesn't really help its case, okay? So just identifying those particular red flags can be a really effective strategy in saying, okay, if I'm gonna read through this article, and I've never heard of blue state conservative before, but it has several of these red flags. Let's take some other let's put this to the side as probably not a credible source and look for information elsewhere. Okay, so going back to actually like learning those rhetorical devices themselves and spotting them can be a really effective defense mechanism against just absorbing this kind of information and taking it as true. It's really easy for folks to absorb whatever they're presented. Okay, so that's sort of one of the big challenges with our information environment. You see what you see and you don't see what you don't see, and what you don't see is like so much more vast than what you do see, like what's actually in front of you. Okay, so we want to talk about the strategy of evaluating veracity by looking things up. Now, I'm not calling this fact checking for a reason. Okay, so fact checking is really a specific type of journalism work. It's very important journalism work, but we don't need to we don't need to do full fact checking for all the information that exists across the internet. It's time consuming, and we need to be able to discern quickly whether something's likely true or likely false and be able to move forward and make a decision on it. So we're talking about a veracity evaluation methodology. This is our own analysts at Ad Fontes Media go through this process of evaluating veracity in order to determine within 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whether a claim itself is true. So in today's information environment, students' default reaction should be to look up more information on things that they are unsure about. And I have this image of like a Google search here, and it seems really simple, just like dead simple to teach people to look something up, but people just don't. They flat don't. So the more you can instill that as a strategy with your students, the better off they're going to be lifelong. So just a quick overview of like how the steps we take to determine veracity of a particular article or a piece of content that we come across is we go through these methodology steps. I'm just going to run through these quickly. I do whole webinars on just this thing, but this is our basic process. One is just determine whether you have reason to question the veracity or statement of an underlying or implied claim. Just think about it. Two, the simple step, look it up, like type questions into your Google search bar. 3, sort the types of results that you get into like high quality, medium quality, and low quality sources of corroboration. So like when you search something, it's not just, search it, but like what different buckets of search results are you getting? Follow the links and read further on high quality corroborating sources, and then weigh the relative credibility of any conflicting information, because that's sort of the problem. Like why people get lost is there's competing information out there, and when people come across competing information, they don't quite think through how to weigh the relative credibility, but we'll talk about that. So, an exercise to determine like when you have a reason to question the veracity of something. And this is something that's really helpful to walk through your students. Like when you read something, sometimes like our natural, like we have like natural instincts to question something, but I want to talk about what it is that is creating those like quote unquote natural instincts, because they're not natural for everyone. Okay. Um, 1, when the claim sounds really far-fetched. Okay. Um, that's reason number 1. 2, when you have prior knowledge that potentially refutes the claim. Okay, so this is actually more helpful the more prior knowledge you have. All right, this is harder when folks are inexperienced readers, they have not been exposed to a lot of news sources, or they're very young, right? So if you have prior knowledge, like you as an educator are going to have more prior knowledge that potentially refutes claims that you're coming across than your students are going to have, right? But if for students, what that might look like is, I haven't heard this before, or I've heard the opposite. That is prior knowledge that can potentially refute the claim, and that's a trigger for questioning the veracity and going and looking stuff up. Another reason is when it would be big if true, but you haven't heard it anywhere reputable, right? You find something that's like far-fetched and shocking, but it's on like a really obscure podcast or a website that you've not really heard of, and you Google it and you can't really find it anywhere else. Or when the claim appeals to you emotionally, whether very positively or very negatively. Okay, so this is sort of social media in a nutshell. People get confirmation bias from misinformation, and they share it. They react angrily. Those are triggers that when students can learn to recognize them in themselves, like, ooh, I really love this information and I want it to be true, or I really hate this information, it makes me very angry. That's a reason where you should stop and question the veracity. And it's not just like explicit claims to evaluate veracity. Sometimes there's implicit ones as well. Explicit claims that you need to evaluate are things that, like, say, like an actual statement that says, like, X is true or X happened, right? Like the government, or like Bill Gates is trying to depopulate the planet through vaccines, right? That's an explicit claim. An implicit claim would be like, it's an implied or underlying claim that suggests that X like X happened or X exists, and it's usually in the form of a question. An example is, why is Bill Gates all of a sudden so interested in vaccines? He's a computer guy, isn't that suspicious? So it's the question, like they're implying that Bill Gates is like up to something no good, even though they didn't explicitly say that. In either case, you want to evaluate the veracity. So for that implied claim, identify what the implied claim is and evaluate that. So the implied claim in this Bill Gates example is, well, is Bill Gates up to no good? Like, I would have to go and find some proof of that if somebody's going to actually make that claim. Otherwise, I want to discard that as not true. Okay. All right. So let me show you some examples of people not looking stuff up, and how just the simple practice of looking things up can go such a long way in evaluating veracity. All right, so here are like real adults. This is an example, I'm not kidding you, from like 2 days ago that I came across on my LinkedIn. Now, as I was doing some background research for this webinar, I had no shortage of possible examples that I could show you, unfortunately. Okay, so what do we have here? So this this person who shared this is on LinkedIn. So this is technically the job description, which is won't comply to the skull and crossbones um, vaccine, lethal injection, death jabs, communist illegal measures. And measures is spelled incorrectly with an apostrophe just for good measures. Okay, so what is this person sharing? Obviously, this person is like, not a big fan of vaccines. It shared a post from somebody else, and all it says is new normal, mad face. Okay, so there is a meme that's it's four different headlines apparently. So school morning tragedy of teen girl who died, quote, unexpectedly in her sleep. Girl 11 dies after going into cardiac arrest at school. School in morning after two pupils die suddenly in 1 week. Washington Post, fifth grader in Maryland dies after sudden medical emergency in classroom. Interesting. Okay. So what is so there's 115 reactions and 57 comments. So people are like stirred up by this, right? They're like mad about something, or want to engage about something. What are the reasons that we have to question veracity, and like what are what is the implied claim here? The implied claim here is that children children are dying because of something that the government is doing, or because of vaccines or shots or something like that, right? And that this is a new normal, and they're mad about it. But that's all right. So why do we have reason to doubt this? Like, so for me, there's some prior knowledge that already goes into this, right? Um, this talks about a girl who's 11 and a fifth grader. And so fifth graders usually 10 or 11. So this is from earlier this week. I know, like prior knowledge, that vaccines for children only got approved last week, and we're like for children 5 to 11 in the United States, a Pfizer vaccine was approved, right? So I know that prior to I think November 6th or 5th, there were no children getting under the age of 11 getting vaccines. However, like this is saying a 10th and 11th grader, or a 10-year-old and 11-year-old died, and this is implying that it's from vaccines, right? Like the whole spiel here is implying that, right? But my prior knowledge makes me think, I don't know that this is true. So what do we do if we don't know if it's true? We look it up. We want to look it up. All right. So how do we go about doing that? Let me show you another a comment. This is the first comment, and I noticed this one because it's my friend, right? He said, "Did anyone read these articles? I looked all four up and none say anything about COVID or being vaccinated." Okay, but look at the rest of the comments. The rest of the comments are like, genocide? Soon they'll quit reporting these events. More to follow. Vaccinating kids is such a bad idea. Pay attention, and they're like people are not even questioning it. So there's all like most of the comments are just assuming what like the implied claim is true, that like vaccines are killing children, right? That's a huge leap and could be avoided just by doing what my friend did, which is looking it up. So let's do this. Let's Google it, okay? So I Googled. Can somebody tell me if you actually see my Google screen right now?
Yes, we can see it.
Um, cool. Okay, so it says I literally took this the title and put it in quotes. Okay, school morning unexpected tragedy of teen girl who died unexpectedly in her sleep, and I put the names of the authors in there. Okay, and so what was interesting is that the the only exact results I could find were other memes, and then this same meme and images. And then I found this one article that appears to be the underlying article, which is this one from express.co.uk. And it says, school morning tragedy of a teen girl who died unexpectedly in her sleep. And again, if you read this, this is in England, and it says, absolutely nothing about COVID or vaccines or what the cause of death was or anything. But this article made it seem that that it was, right. Same thing with this with the fifth grader, the Washington Post story. Here's that title: fifth grader in Maryland class dies after a sudden medical emergency in classroom. This was October 26th. Okay. And it says that the school system officials do not know the child's cause of death. Here's what, the emergency came at 9:50 a.m. School system said they cannot comment on any possible link to the coronavirus because they have no information about what causes severe distress, right? It's, they have some details about people that they interviewed on site at the school. Just a straight fact reporting story, but it was used in service of misinformation to suggest that this is a new normal and that vaccines are killing children, right? So that's that's tough to deal with. Just the practice of looking things up should become like the default in this new information environment. Okay, so there are lots of different results that folks can find when you're looking for information online, right? Going back to the example of Aaron Rodgers saying he was concerned about vaccines affecting his fertility, those like that particular concern is shared by a lot of by a lot of people who are not, they're not dumb, they're not uh, conspiracy theorists, they're not going down these rabbit holes, but they're based in misinformation that's like all over the internet, right? For a long time, misinformation about COVID and the fact that it's that your accusations of you're causing infertility with women or causing side effects among women are based in stories like this. Okay, so if I'm gonna pull up another example of misinformation, right? If you look at this one, COVID vaccines, a cure worse than the disease. Where did I link to this from? I linked to this from something called the Medical Rebel, Dr. Lee Merritt, right? Now, you and I might look at this information and think like, this is pretty clearly like, this got a bunch of different red flags, like this scary picture of like children getting vaccinated. This seems to be like a extremely uh, like straightforward anti-vax kind of website. It has a link to an article that says, are vaccines harming more than the vax? And look at the picture. The picture is of a pregnant woman with a with her pregnant belly, and it says shedding, right? So if you click on this, it takes you to this article called where'd it go? Sorry, I have so much misinformation open. Where it shares more of this type of misinformation, like, are vaccines harming more than the vax? Our medical experts are injecting us with a genetic agents that may not only recombine with those who have gotten a COVID vaccine, but may also lead to the infection of others who have been vaccinated, right? So there's a theory that people who are vaccinated can shed like the COVID virus. And even if you're like a pregnant person, like standing next to somebody who's vaccinated, it could affect you and your baby, cause you fertility problems. And so, while people might not have read this particular article and might not have, gone to these websites that seem like pretty outlandish, it doesn't take much for one of their friends to share something like that, or some of their friends to post like, well, I heard that this vaccine isn't good for pregnant people. And when that's all the information you have, like, well, I've heard, from a rumor, and they don't take the time to look it up, that's where these sorts of concerns, like legitimate concerns, can get planted in people's minds. Because when it comes to like, you're pregnant and it's like your baby, and you're concerned for the health of that baby, or you want to have children and you're concerned about your own fertility, yeah, if you don't know the answer, then that gives you pause. It's like your own, it's your own health, right? So it's understandable, but the root of it is something that you can work through by Googling, by cross-comparing different sorts of information. but most people don't take the actual time to do it. So it's really important to go to weigh the credibility of information. Let me just go back here. All right, so weighing competing information, some strategies. So sometimes you'll find that sources can tell you conflicting information. So you find this, the articles that I just showed you, that for various reasons that you and I could identify, just don't seem very credible. But not everybody's great at weighing the competing information, right? You might, let's see. So when you have conflicting information, it's really important to weigh their credibility. Now, juries do this all the time, weighing conflicting evidence between two parties. Parents and teachers do this all the time, weighing conflicting stories from children, right? But not everybody's in the practice of weighing information. And you want to ask yourself which set of information is more credible, right? So I can just, Google that question, like, do vaccines cause infertility? Okay. All right. So so it's top results. We've got results from, all right, getvaccineanswers.org. Okay. Let's see that. You might not be familiar with all these information sources, and neither might your students, but this is getvaccineanswers.org from the Ad Council. It gives you information that basically says, COVID vaccines are effective and safe. All right, there's one piece of information. Here's another one. COVID vaccines are infertility. All right. This doctor explains that there's no evidence that any of the COVID vaccines cause issues with fertility. Okay. And then we've got, let's see, the CDC. There's currently no evidence, no evidence that any vaccines, including COVID-19 vaccines, cause fertility problems in women and men. So more information from the CDC, henryford.com. It's about, it says, well, here's where that COVID-19 vaccine infertility myth came from. And it actually, this is a Henry Ford health system, so it's a hospital system in the Midwest. So it goes through lots of different evidence, right? So now you've got evidence to weigh. You've got the medicalrebel.com with these scary pictures, and this other article. Let's see. Is it a cure worse than the disease? And when you read through this, it's like less compelling. There's a bunch of reasons why you could go through that and be like, I'm not sure about this. And then you've got the other this other set of results that you saw. So in terms of like weighing credibility, when you've got competing information, this is a great exercise to walk through the way that the information is presented, and have your students determine, like, based on these two sets of information, what looks more credible to you. And usually they'll come up with the answer that these higher profile, more credible seeming results are indeed more credible. Okay. All right. Factors of credibility. Reputation, likelihood, and incentives. It's really important to think through all three. It's not just one thing. Reputation is helpful, like if you know of credible sources like the CDC or the WHO or primary source materials or medical studies or well-known reputable news sources. That's one clue, right? But sometimes you find information from something that you've never heard of. It can still be reputable. So reputation is one thing, but it's not the only thing. Likelihood is a really big one, right? What's the likelihood that of a grand conspiracy, like a plot by all the governments of the world and the media elites, things like weighing likelihood of a particular claim is really important. And then incentives, right? What are the incentives for the people giving you the information? Sometimes that's ownership, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's power, sometimes it's like getting followers on your YouTube channel, things like that. There's all sorts of things that can incentivize people to share information, right? So if you just do one of these, like if you just think about reputation, or you just think about likelihood, or just think about incentives, that will often not give you the complete picture. And I'm going to have to move on because there's like so much more I can say about that, but I'll leave it there. Strategy 3 is use real examples, okay? So diving deep into an actual example of misinformation can take a long time, but showing students the mechanics of how you look things up is really highly effective, okay? I strongly discourage being like dismissive of questions that students bring to you that just sound ludicrous, sound ridiculous, right? Because there's misinformation out there that is based on a real information. That's the nature of most misinformation right now, is that it's got underlying truths to it, right? So one of the really common underlying truth, well, let me show you a real example, okay? Again, this can take a long time to go through in class, but just the mechanics of looking things up can empower students to look things up themselves, okay? So I'm gonna switch my screen here. All right, so here's a video from rumble.com, and it says the first US lab examines, quote, vaccine vials, horrific findings revealed, okay? And if you go through this video, I'm not gonna play it because you won't be able to hear the sound. This is um, rumble.com, if you're not familiar, is a site that has that it's like YouTube, except for YouTube videos that like got kicked off YouTube for misinformation, right? It really not very credible to like be starting here in the first place. And the claims of this woman who's a doctor is that she looked at vaccine vials under a microscope and saw that they gave off weird lights and it had some squiggly things. So from that, she implied that there was like an injectable computer in there and something with tentacles, right? Like a living thing with tentacles. I mean, really wild, outlandish claims, right? So just walking through an example like that, and then looking up, like walking through the various different logical fallacies or reasons why you would question the concept, like why you would question a claim such as, there's an injectable computer in this vaccine, or there's an animal with tentacles in this vaccine, right? Like walking through that itself arms your students, right? So it's super instructive to actually look at this um, and uh, and not actually dismiss things, right? Oh, here's one more thing I wanted to show you. I'm just gonna play this and let this scroll. Okay, look at the bottom scroll on here. Okay, it says, all right, it says hospitalizations, urgent care, Bell's palsy, 15,000 deaths. All right, where did those numbers come from? Okay, if you didn't look at that scroll at the very beginning, it said VAERS numbers, VAERS numbers, and it had and all those things were like, numbers from something called VAERS, right? So if your students didn't were watching this for the first time, they didn't know the difference between Stu Peters and like this guy on Rumble, as opposed to a like nightly news anchor on a more credible station, they might look at that and say, wow, it seems like this many people have gone to urgent care and gotten Bell's palsy and were hospitalized and died because of the vaccines, because that's what he seems to be claiming, right? So how would you look up and debunk some of these underlying claims? Well, one of the things you do is Google, like, what is VAERS? VAERS. Okay, so the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System is a United States program for vaccine safety, co-managed by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Food and Drug Administration, right? So it's based on, all right, if you click on this information, it describes to you what the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System is. It says adverse events are not necessarily side effects caused by vaccination. It's an adverse event is a health problem that happens after vaccination that may or may not be caused by a vaccine. These events may require further investigation. By definition, a side effects has been shown to be linked to a vaccine by scientific studies, right? So these are like, you have to read to understand like what VAERS is and what it is not. But this is underlying information, underlying true information that people have reported that after a vaccine, things have happened. Like after a vaccine, a person died. After a vaccine, a person got sick. Doesn't mean that they got the vaccine and the vaccine caused the death or caused them to be sick. It just says that like one thing happened, then another thing happened. But that information can be used in the service of promoting something false, right? So getting your students to like go through this process and understanding the difference between, you know, like taking that leap from something really outlandish, dialing down, like drilling down into like Googling and finding finding more reputable sources, finding more reputable information, can equip them and train them. And it's much more effective than saying, no, that's not true. Like no one dies from the vaccine, or no one has, like there's no side effects. Like being dismissive is usually inaccurate, right? Saying that there are side effects, there are injuries, there are reactions, right? So dismissing things totally out of hand is usually ineffective, because then if students know like some underlying information to be true, then they feel like, you know, maybe you're lying to them, right? So I just caution against being dismissive and promote really diving into real life examples. Okay, that's hopefully I have like beat into your head that you should really go through real life examples, because that's what I want. All right, resources. Hopefully I have not overwhelmed you, because you know I showed you a lot of misinformation, and you know it it seems to come from all angles here, and that can be really frustrating. I want to leave you with some tools that you can use, you know, that are at your disposal. Hopefully you can see this. I've got this handout that we can email to participants afterwards, that list out the red flags that I went over in a little bit more detail. There's actually 8 of them. So this says 8 ways that critical thinkers know when a news story is unreliable, disreputable, or embarrassing to share. These are the red flags. These are the rhetorical devices to train your students to look at. And then the other one is one of our resources. Well, the other one's ours too, but the Interactive Media Bias Chart Education Pro. So, you know, it's really hard to keep up with all the different news sources that are out there. What the Interactive Media Bias Chart Educator Pro is, it's a full unlimited access to our database of news source reliability and bias. So I'm going to show it to you here real quick. Oh, sorry. Hopefully you can see can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can see the media bias chart.
Okay, and then this is gonna take a second to populate here, but our Interactive Media Bias Chart Educator Pro is fully updated with all of um, our rated news sources across websites and podcasts and TV shows. And it looks like a very busy version of the media bias chart. It's got over 1,000 news sources on here, at 1,200 to be specific. You can sort by websites, TV, and audio, and you can search any of the ones that you might come across.
A real
So
quick one that might
yeah,
fit into this. Somebody asked how you would rate Wikipedia, so that might be a good example.
yeah.
Um,
We don't rate Wikipedia because it's like an aggregator of information. That's more of like that's like another reference. Like we're rating news and news-like sources
mhm.
in this one. So we don't have Wikipedia on there, but if you're looking for things like one of the uh, more common like health misinformation sites, Mercola, right? What's hard about some of these sites is that this one has a lot of misinformation, stuff that's rated inaccurate or misleading or problematic, but then it has other articles um, that are reliable, right? Let's see, Natural News is another one. These are all in like the health misinformation space. They have related ones like like climate.news, right? It's down here as well. So you can search for any news source that we've got rated on here, and I'll stop. I'll just leave it there. But if you like what we do and you want to have access to the most up-to-date information for news source reliability and bias, the best thing that you can do to support us as a company and get top quality information for your school is to be our customer. We do provide subscriptions to the Interactive Media Bias Chart Pro on a annual basis, and it's based on school size. So you can visit our website for that. But that's what I've got. Oops. That's what I've got for today. I'll leave a little bit of time for questions, but please feel free to email me at info@adfontesmedia.com. I know we'll make these slides available and that handout resource
Recording.
as well.
So there was a question about the resource that you mentioned with the red flag
Mm-hmm.
chart. There was a question as to how they were able to share that. Are they allowed to put it on a public site? Do they have to put it behind any kind of login information? Is there a preference?
Nope, that one we give for free. So uh, yeah.
Some other questions. What do you do when credible sites like the CDC come into question? How would you reply to that?
Yeah. So, it's really important to get as specific as possible on the particular thing that a student is questioning, or like the teacher or parent is questioning, right? So it's really easy for people to dismiss like things with a broad brush, right? Like, oh well, you can't believe the liberal media, or or the fact checkers, or the CDC, like they're all lying. We want to get that's really hard to refute. Like, all of the CDC is lying, all of the media, like who are you talking about, right? So ask somebody to bring you a specific claim, right? So if it's a student that says, well, I heard that the CDC isn't a reliable source of information, okay? Ask them, like, all right, like, can you show me an article, or show me like the post, or show me the source that you got that information from, okay? And if you can start from there, then you can go through the exercise, like, because it'll probably be a disreputable source that you can go through and like identify. Yeah, like you can walk through the example together. But unless you have like the piece of information that they're looking at, it's sort of pointless to be like, well, no, they are true. Like, at that point, it's just like, you know, no, I'm not. Yes, I am. That's not really going to get anywhere. Try to get a specific piece of information.
So this is a question that I think might be fun for you. Why is misinformation so compelling? Why do people seem motivated to believe things that may or may not be true, or kind of go with that broad brushstroke
Yeah.
approach? Mhm.
Actually, the Surgeon General of the United States came out with a media literacy toolkit, or health misinformation toolkit today. I haven't had a chance to check it out. I just saw it right before this webinar, and I think one of the topics is like, why is misinformation so compelling? So I do recommend checking that out. But in our experience, it's there's valid reasons for distrust of governments and companies and institutions, because there have been bad actors. Like, there are bad actors, there are cover-ups, there are legitimately unethical things that institutions and individual people do, right? And people like to think of themselves as critical thinkers, and they like to think of themselves as independent. And if it's something that already aligns with something that you hold close as like an identity value, like your party or your religion, or just like your sense of who you are, then it's comforting, right? It's like that confirmation bias is very appealing to us. It's like, and I analogize it to like junk food. So junk news is like junk food. We like things that are bad for us sometimes. It just gives us the physiological rewards, like dopamine hits.
Okay. The last question that I'll put to you is, how do we accommodate for Google's own biases or other issues with elevating misinformation, such as the case of Dylan Roof?
Um, so searching Google a bunch of different ways is is really crucial. Like searching like an exact quote of what you're looking for, searching like the term like plus news or like plus Wikipedia, so you can find like if you're not familiar with what I mean, like search what you're searching for and then put the word news or put the word Wikipedia, so you can like go straight to those resources, or you can go straight to like the Google News tab. There are different like biases within the Google algorithm that are not just like political bias. There's like the personalization bias and like what you search, your search history and things like that. But so it's sort of a lot to get into. But searching multiple different ways is is key to surfacing as many different types of results as possible. Like just change the wording a little bit.
Okay. Really quick, we were so happy to have you on. As a part of InfoBase kind of hosting Vanessa, we were so happy to have you on, and there was tons of great feedback today. There are some individuals that do want to connect with you after and outside of this on some different ideas that we will gladly connect you with. Can you see the issues and controversies screen that I'm showing?
I can, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So InfoBase comes from 80 years of publishing content. We're super proud to say that we have content that is both, reliable and neutral across topics like issues and controversies, where we get into point for point walkthroughs and kind of overviews of all the topics. We also have Polling the Nations, where we're kind of you're getting just a decades worth of actual live polls that were put out there to either support or show some of that kind of trending feeling about how different topics are affecting society at large. Again, true or not, it kind of shows where the political, where the social mind is at. And also our World News Digest product. So these are all products that are also able to be trialed or quoted if you're interested in content for your school or your classroom. Um, I also have two more screens, and then I will give Vanessa closing statements. And InfoBase also puts out free content in our information literacy toolkit. Vanessa was gladly one of our participants in the information literacy toolkit. This webinar will be available there in the future. Anybody who attended or anybody who already signed up will have the recording sent to them. We'll be also sharing Vanessa's slides. And you can certainly connect with her. She does share her information to get in touch with her outside of the InfoBase kind of hosting it. And if you are interested in a trial or a quote of any of the products I showed you, Polling the Nations, which deals with that live survey information, issues and controversies, or World News Digest, you can always reach out to online sales at infobase.com, where we would connect you with somebody who could talk you through the benefits of it or how it could fill any of the gap needs at your institution.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Mhm.
It's great to be with you today. And if you have any questions for me, please contact us at our website. Thanks.
Okay, fantastic. Everybody, thank you for attending today. And like I said, we'll be reaching out to all of you after this. Vanessa, have a great afternoon.
You too, Greg. Thanks.